Hello. You probably know that many of the medicines that we take today originate from plants. Scientists are also looking at how sea life, the sponges, corals and other marine organisms we find in the sea, can create new, more powerful drugs. The reason they need to do this is because of a health problem which does feature in the news sporadically, but not as often as perhaps it should. It is the problem of antibiotic resistance. Antibiotics are prescribed by doctors to patients who are ill with a bacterial infection. When you're ill, you generally know that you're ill. You have symptoms of illness, you don't feel well, but you probably don't know whether the illness was caused by a bacterial or a viral infection. Let's compare these two causes of illness. That's an important starting point, because part of the problem with antibiotic resistance is that too many patients are taking too many antibiotics for illnesses which should not be treated by antibiotics because they are not bacterial infections. They are in fact viral infections. So both viral and bacterial infections cannot be seen by the naked eye. They're much too small. They both can cause similar symptoms in patients, which is why antibiotics are often incorrectly prescribed. In terms of differences, a bacterium is a single complex cell. It can survive on its own, inside or outside the body. In fact, most bacteria aren't harmful. We have many on and inside our bodies, especially in the gut, to help us to digest food. Viruses, on the other hand, are smaller and are not cells. Unlike bacteria, they need a host, such as a human or animal, in order to multiply. Viruses cause infections by entering and multiplying inside the host's healthy cells. Typical viral infections include the common cold, flu, coughs, bronchitis, chickenpox, and HIV. These viral infections are self-limiting, which means that your body's own immune system will usually fight off the virus, and after a few days you'll start to recover. Bacterial infections, on the other hand, will not self-heal over time. They will get worse, which is why, of course, antibiotics are required to solve the problem. The most common bacterial infections that are treated with antibiotics are as follows: acne, bronchitis, conjunctivitis, which is pink eye, ear infections, and sexually transmitted diseases. The last course of antibiotics I took was for an infection in the root of a tooth. Very, very painful. The most common antibiotics which you may have taken are as follows. You've got amoxicillin, doxycycline, ciprofloxacin. Quite difficult to say. These come under brand names such as Augmentin, Flagyl or Flagyl ER, Amoxil and Cipro. Now, over the last few years, doctors have noticed that antibiotics are slowly becoming less useful in treating bacterial infections because the bacteria causing the illnesses are becoming stronger. They are resisting the antibiotics. The main reason for this resistance to antibiotics is that too many patients have been using antibiotics too many times to treat viral infections. In fact, antibiotic resistance is one of the greatest problems facing medicine today because of our overuse. Research led by Dr. Carolyn Tarrant from the University of Leicester looked into the problem and came up with some possible solutions. The problem, it seems, basically is that as a doctor, you have responsibility to solve the patient's problems. As I said earlier, the symptoms of viral and bacterial infections can be quite similar. So for a doctor to not prescribe antibiotics is quite risky. The patient may indeed require them. But often the patient has a viral infection and does not need antibiotics, but is prescribed them anyway, just in case. You see, doctors don't necessarily have the time to fully investigate the patient, so they err on the side of caution and prescribe antibiotics just in case they've missed a serious infection in their diagnosis. As Dr. Eva Krakow explains, and I quote, "Often it's hard to tell whether patients have bacterial infections and need antibiotic treatment. Under circumstances of uncertainty, doctors worry about missing an infection and the patient deteriorating, so to be safe, they err on the side of overprescribing." End quote. When patients take prescribed drugs when they do not need them, the consequences are an increase in the risk of antibiotic resistance, a lowering of the options for future treatments if an antibiotic is needed, and putting a patient at risk of side effects and the extra cost due to unnecessary drug treatment. So to summarise, in the short term the patient will undoubtedly get better, either through the body's own immune system or the antibiotics, but in the longer term the overall outcome of the loss of antibiotic effectiveness through overuse is collectively worse for everyone. So the research by Dr. Tarrant suggests some simple ideas for optimizing antibiotic use. These include the following. Firstly is to regulate access to antibiotics more strictly. Second, to emphasize the problem of antibiotic effectiveness to health practitioners and patients. Third, the rules for antibiotic prescribing should be made collectively with both clinicians and patients involved. Number 4 is that doctors' prescribing behaviour should be monitored and they should be given feedback so that they can change if they do need to change. Dr. Tarrant said that rather than expecting individual doctors to bear the responsibility for reducing their prescribing to protect antibiotics for the future, the research argues that we should use more collective approaches, and this means establishing a consensus-based rules for antibiotic use and sharing data on prescribing and using public reputation as a way of encouraging good prescribing practice by the doctor. It appears that if antibiotics continue to be prescribed in the same quantity, some of the ailments that we currently recover from quickly may in the future become serious illnesses that could even result in death. So before you go to the doctor demanding antibiotics, ask yourself if perhaps a paracetamol and a lie down in bed might be a better cure. Thank you.